with Team Virgadamo and eXp Realty, and welcome to another episode of Today in Tampa Bay. Today we are fortunate to have with us Dave Middleton. He is our top real estate agent with our team, our top buyer's agent, and he is one of the top real estate agents in all of the Tampa Bay area. Dave's specialty has been working with buyers, and today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the steps involved in buying a home and try to clarify some of the myths so that you'll know exactly what's expected to buy a home. So welcome, Dave, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much for that kind introduction.
Okay, Dave, before we get started, and I know you're going to go into detail on each of the 8 steps, can you just kind of summarize and quickly tell us what those 8 steps are, and then we'll take the time to go into each step in detail.
Absolutely. So the first step is to prepare to buy. After that, you want to meet, this is step 2, you want to meet with a real estate agent. Number 3 is you want to establish your price range and financing. This is the budget step. Step 4 is to determine your housing requirements. What type of home are you looking for? Step 5 is to start house hunting, looking at those homes. Step 6 is to present an offer for purchase for a home that you've decided you like. Step 7 is for that offer to be presented to the sellers for their response and hopeful acceptance. And then step 8 is closing the sale and getting those keys into your hands. And as Paul was saying, our goal for this podcast is to share with you information about the home buying process. And it certainly is a process that you would not want to start without being prepared. You wouldn't go on a journey without packing your suitcase and getting yourself prepared, right? So why would you think that you would go ahead and buy a home on an impulse? So the first step is really making sure that you are truly prepared to buy. That means that you are ready and willing and able to go through the other steps. And it starts off first with that preparation piece. So what are some things that you would need to know in order to be able to really be prepared to buy a home? So the first thing is, how quickly do you need to be in your new property? That's a fundamental question in terms of getting prepared to buy your home. What type of location, what type of home, what type of community is it that you're really the most interested in? Some of these, again, are fundamental questions that you want to have in your mind before you start this process, because it'll make the process going a lot easier and a lot smoother. Once you have really prepared yourself to buy a property or start the process, really the next step is to get with a real estate agent. And in this case, a buyer's agent like myself.
So Dave, if I could interrupt you. So the first step before you even talk to a real estate agent is to get into the proper mindset, do your preparation in terms of what you're looking for in terms of buying a home or just thinking about what your needs are. And this is before you would even go. So step 1, preparing. And then step 2 would be to meet with a real estate agent.
Correct.
So what happens there? I mean, there's thousands of real estate agents. As a matter of fact, in the country, there's 1.5 million real estate agents out there. How do you pick the right one?
Well, first of all, experience really matters, okay. Right? So that's the first step in terms of picking your agent. Making sure that you're choosing an agent that has the experience and the knowledge of your local market to be able to help you with this process. Again, if you were going to go on a journey, wouldn't you want somebody who's been there before? Wouldn't you want somebody who can guide you and avoid the pitfalls and make the process as smooth as possible? That's why hiring a real estate agent that has the experience and the knowledge is such a crucial part. You know, and again, one of the sayings that we live by at Team Virgadamo is basically who you hire truly matters. Because again, this is a very important process for you to go through, and it can be something that if you don't have an experienced agent, you might not have as successful an outcome. So one of the things that I really think is important is that you talk to your agent, sit down, have a meeting. I love meeting clients, for a cup of coffee, because I'm not the one buying the home. Right? And as we talked about, the first step is preparing to buy and having an idea what you want. I'm not the person that's going to be selecting the home for you. That's going to be you, right? So really, that first meeting is important for you to get to know the agent, find out what their experience level is, find out how they like to work with their clients, what they can offer their clients, and then for them to really get to know you.
So Dave, if I could interject, what I hear you saying is that basically who you hire, and that's our slogan, truly does matter. Now, Would you recommend in the process that to make the right informed decision that a potential buyer interview more than one real estate agent?
Absolutely. We're not scared of competition at Team Virgadamo. We believe strongly that after you have an opportunity to talk to other agents, you'll notice a tangible difference between the way we approach the marketplace, the way in which we treat our clients, and in the way other agents do so. Because again, who you hire truly matters. And part of the process of going to buy a home is your comfort level and your feeling that you're being taken care of by your agent. And after having an opportunity to sit down with you, find out what your needs truly are, getting to know you, that helps us help you in a much more easy and relaxed manner than if somebody is just rushing through dealing with a lot of other people at the same time and really not paying attention. A lot of agents would prefer just to get a basic understanding of what you need and then just send you listings. So you are consistently going through a tremendous number of emails, looking at every home, hoping that something sticks. That's not our approach. I mean, we certainly will provide you with listings, but we would much rather curate those listings and get a much tighter sense of what it is you're looking for to really better meet your need.
Well, one of the things, I've heard, and I'm sure you've heard with all the years that we've spent together in the business, is that, a lot of times when somebody talks about hiring an agent, they may hear that there's a friend in the family that just got their real estate license, or somebody else knows somebody else. And very often, this is the biggest financial investment you're going to make in your lifetime. So it's important to trust that financial investment with a trusted real estate advisor, wouldn't you say?
That's a really great point, Paul. Imagine, let's go back to the analogy of going on a journey. Wouldn't you want somebody to guide you on that journey who's been there before? So the agent who just became an agent, who hasn't helped hundreds or thousands of people purchase a home or sell a home, they might have some basic knowledge about the process. They might have some basic knowledge about the market, but they're not going to have that in-depth knowledge and experience that we bring to the table. So again, if I'm traveling to a foreign area where I haven't done this a lot, I would want somebody who is much more familiar than somebody who may have gone there once before and just really doesn't have that depth of knowledge. Because again, it's about the experience that you're going to have working with an experienced agent that is the most crucial thing. As Paul mentioned, this is a very big financial decision for most people. So when there's as much at stake as there is in the home buying process, you certainly would want to have somebody there with you who can help you make the process as smooth and as easy as possible.
So in other words, I guess you wouldn't want to go to a handyman if you were looking to totally renovate and build a new home.
That's exactly right. Who you hire truly does matter.
Now, let me ask you this, Dave. What about new construction? Okay, we're talking about existing homes right now. What about new construction? A lot of times we hear people say, well, I'm just going to go to the new home builder and I'll buy my home through them. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's actually a very common myth, that you don't need to have an agent represent you when you're going to the new construction office, right? In essence, the builder will hire an agent, a real estate agent, to manage the transaction, but that person really is representing the builder and not the person who's coming in to buy the home. So they serve as a transaction broker, which is a lower level of representation than what you typically get with Team Virgadamo. So in that instance, that person's loyalty is to the builder. The builder is the one who's paying them their commission. So what I would suggest is absolutely, if you're interested in new construction, go to the new construction office, but you tell them that you're working with an agent. And the moment you tell them you're working with an agent, and hopefully you tell them you're working with Dave Middleton and Team Virgadamo, then what happens is now that builder knows that you're being represented and knows that all of the paperwork that you were to sign if you decided to build a new home has to be looked over by your agent, and that we would be helping you through that process as well. And so, again, wouldn't you want to have somebody there with you as opposed to trusting in the benefits of the person who works for the builder? So again, we absolutely recommend that you continue to work with an agent even if you're going to buy something that's new construction.
So basically, once again, you're protected.
Absolutely. Again, I would want somebody who has my back. We haven't talked yet about agency representation, but at Team Virgadamo, we want to represent as many of our clients as possible as a single agent, which basically means I have a fiduciary relationship responsibility to my client. It means that we put your money first before anything else. Your needs are paramount in the process. You have full, total loyalty, transparency in all dealings, and it's the highest level of representation that a buyer can receive from an agent. In contrast, if you go into the builder's office, the agent that's there that will write a contract is only representing the buyer as a transaction broker. So their loyalty isn't to the buyer, it's to the transaction itself. So they're more interested in the transaction than they're interested in what your needs are and what is in your best interest. Whereas as a single agent, I absolutely have your best interests at mind, and I have to keep those interests paramount at all times.
That's a very interesting point, and which leads me to another question regarding the selection of an agent. Very often I've heard over the years that, well, you'll get a call, somebody wants to go see a home, and they'll go through looking at listings online, which is very easy these days, and they'll contact several different agents to show them several different properties. And, they jump from one agent to the next, and I don't really think that's in the best interest of the buyer. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about it, if a person only has a very short time period with you to show you one home, how do they really get to know what you're interested in, what your needs are, and then how to help you go through the process, as smoothly and as efficiently as possible? It kind of reminds me of a situation that I was in when my family was fortunate enough to travel to Paris. We could have gone on a bunch of individual tours with individual tour guides, but we were fortunate enough to find the right one, and that person took us around Paris and showed us the best things of Paris while we were there with them. And it allowed us to form a relationship with this person so that when it came down to having a little bit more free time, they knew the types of things we were interested in and were able to get us to those locations, get us to have those experiences. So again, working with one agent would be something that we would absolutely recommend, because that way that agent gets to know you, gets to know your family, what your needs are, and then can help you find more properties that meet those needs, as opposed to kind of taking a scattershot approach. Again, when there's thousands of properties on the market, how do you narrow it down so you're not wasting your time seeing properties that you wouldn't be interested in, and really get to focus on those properties you would be interested in buying?
So really the suggestion then would become, once you've narrowed down an agent that you're comfortable with after going through the interview process, that basically you should enter into some sort of agreement with them, which in most cases that agreement can be canceled at any time depending on the agreement. At least I know that our loyalty agreements can be canceled if you're not happy at any time. But basically that kind of cements a relationship. It's kind of like dating. Now you're engaged, there's no cheating, and I'm going to work with you. And I know if you know that a buyer is serious about buying a home and they have committed to work with you, you're going to commit yourself in terms of your time to work that much harder to get that buyer the property that they're looking for.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. So what Paul's describing is something called an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. And that's basically where the buyer and the buyer's agent agree to work together. And Paul's right. We do sometimes, as buyer's agents, get people who call and request to see a property. But I will tell you that my priority is always to scheduling the needs of the people who I have exclusive buyer brokerage agreements with over anybody else.
And once again, after you've done all the interviewing, you're comfortable with a person, go with that person, see what happens. Okay?
That's absolutely correct.
All right, so that's stage two. So the first thing is prepare to buy. Second part of the process is meet with an agent and select that agent.
That's absolutely.
So where do we go? What's step three, Dave?
So the next step is really budget, right? So we have an idea. You have an idea of what it is you want. You're ready to go through the process. You've met your agent. Now it's time to finalize and cement the type of financing, the type of funding, and the amount of funding that you have for this process. Ultimately, because we're in a free market, the type of financing and the amount of financing that you're able to get, or the amount of cash that you have available for purchase, really drives the properties that are available for you to purchase. And so in order to be able to be competitive in the marketplace, and it is a competitive marketplace, and what I mean by that is that every buyer is competing with other buyers who are currently looking at homes as well. And in some of our most common home types, a lot of people look for 3 bedrooms or bigger, 2 bathrooms or bigger with a 2-car garage, hopefully with a pool in a nice neighborhood with good schools and at a good price. There's a finite number of properties that meet those criteria. So it is, in essence, a competition to get into the home, see the home, and then eventually purchase that home. So one of the key pieces is to make sure that the financing, whether it's a cash purchase or whether it's a financed purchase, that financing is solid and ready to go. Because the worst feeling in the world is going into your dream home but not having your financing secured, so that you have to wait a few days to get the lender to approve you for a purchase, and then that home goes under contract to somebody else.
Or you go into your dream home, okay, and it's available for sale. And then when you go to secure your financing at that point, you find out that you can't afford that particular home. So, and basically, I guess what we're saying is you need to get your financing in order before you really start looking at homes, so you know what you're able to do that. And what do you need to do to get the financing in order?
So it is absolutely critical to make sure that you get a pre-approval from a lender in order to be able to really have a clear understanding of the budget for the purchase of a home.
And also know the different types of financing that may be available. And that's just like when you're dealing with a real estate agent, their area of expertise is to help you complete the sale. A good lender is going to basically sit down with you, analyze your needs, and lay out the types of loan products that are available to you.
Absolutely, and it's really critical, especially in our current market, because of the fluctuations that we've seen with interest rates, which, depending on what the rate is that you're able to secure, depending on which lender you're working in with or the type of loan that you're pursuing, could vary, and that has an impact on the monthly payment and the mortgage amount that the buyer might have to be able to pay for a particular property. So Paul is 100% correct that you definitely want to have the opportunity to sit down with the lender and really work through the finances, and they're an important member of the team of people who will help you eventually purchase a home. Again, we also have another saying at Team Virgadamo, which is we stay in our lane. So we don't try to pretend to be the experts in every facet. Instead, we have experts in each of those different pieces to help you go through the process. And there are lenders that will be able to help you go through that
And
process.
essentially, that's what when you hire the team. In our case, you're hiring not just us, you're hiring all of our affiliates as well that can help you complete the process. So that's basically step 3. We've established the price and the financing. So step 1, to kind of recap, is to prepare to buy the home, get your preparation in order. Step 2, select your agent, go through that process. And step 3, to establish your price in terms of what you can afford.
Correct.
Okay.
You have to have the budget in mind.
So where do we go for step 4, Dave?
So the next thing is we're really starting to narrow down our focus, right? So now that
We haven't even seen a house yet at this point.
we haven't, no. and it's something where it might seem strange, but it really is the way we would recommend going through this process to make it as smooth as possible for you. Because now we're not seeing homes that might not meet our needs. We're not seeing homes that might be over budget. We might not be seeing homes that we couldn't afford to purchase. So really now what we do is we sit down together and we would start looking through the listings within the price, the budget that we have established, to really hone in on properties to go and see.
And to do that, I would think that the first thing you would do would be to look at your wants and look at your needs before you even start. I mean, you know what you can afford, you've got your agent, so now basically you have to talk to the agent and establish your motivations and your needs and what you want, correct?
Yeah, it's really about prioritizing, right? Mm-hmm. In a perfect world, we can get you 100% of everything that you want. But we don't live in a perfect world,
Yeah.
right? So really it's about prioritizing. And again, it's identifying, Is the pool the most important feature for you? Is the 3-car, 2-car garage the most important? Are the number of bedrooms in the homes the most important? Because again, as we mentioned before, there are thousands of homes available on the internet. And buyers certainly have much more access to listing information than they've ever had, which is really a good thing for the marketplace. The only thing we would say is that using Realtor or some of the other online, whether it's Zillow, Homes.com, whether it's any of those, they do have limits on the type of features that you can search for. So with a specific agent who, again, you've now agreed to work with and who's looking forward to taking care of your needs, having gotten to know you and know your family and what your needs are, having a better understanding of what the budget is, we can really use the custom searchable features in the MLS to really hone in on those most essential properties. Think about it this way, with so many properties on the market, if you are going to see a home that really doesn't meet your needs and you're missing a home that does meet your needs because you're seeing more homes than maybe you necessarily should, somebody else is seeing that home and might be making an offer on it. So we, again, don't recommend a scattershot approach. We really recommend a more honed-in approach. And that's really what step 4 is. It's where we really prioritize and start narrowing down our focus to homes that really meet your needs.
So I would say that would be, we could consider step 4 to determine your requirements, a buyer consultation, that basically you're consulting with that buyer's agent, telling them what what you're looking for, and it's very possible with an experienced buyer's agent, they may have already seen some of these homes that may fit your need.
Absolutely.
Right?
The more people that you work with, the more homes you show, the more likely we are to be able to identify neighborhoods and homes, in some cases, that already would meet your needs. Typically, when I have this meeting with a client, I'm pulling up the MLS and I'm going through listings that meet some of our generic criteria at first, and then honing in after showing them pictures, images, descriptions of the neighborhood to really then narrow the focus down to homes that they would either want to see right then and there or in a very short time frame, or to create that custom search for them so that way they don't miss out on a home that really meets their needs.
Okay, so basically then, that's step 4. Let's determine the requirement. All right, so we've got the first 4 steps, and let's go to step 5. And step 5 is what, Dave?
It is starting to look at houses.
So basically, we've done all this preparation. We have not seen house 1. But I would think with all this preparation, if your agent has done all this work for you and you've helped them, you've narrowed that realm or the availability of homes down quite a bit, so you're not wasting a lot of your time and you're getting right down to the heart of the matter here.
That's absolutely right. As we had kind of talked about, if you're seeing homes that really don't meet your needs, while you're missing homes that would potentially meet your needs, there are other people that are going and seeing those homes. And again, we're in a competitive marketplace. There's a limited number of properties that meet these the more popular criteria. And our goal as your real estate agent is to make sure that we get you into the homes that best meet your needs, so you have an opportunity to purchase that home should you decide to do so.
So tell us a little bit more about step 5 then. So we're starting the house hunt. So what happens?
Yeah, so basically we've done all that prep work. Let's say, for instance, a new property comes onto the market. Again, one of the advantages of using the MLS that we would provide to you, send to you, we really push out listing information to you, as opposed to you having to go onto Zillow or Realtor or some of these other online sites constantly. We push this information out to you within 15 minutes of a property being listed by an agent. So Paul is the master listing agent in our area. Let's say he takes a listing that's exactly in your criteria. Within 15 minutes of him posting that listing, you would get an email from us saying, hey, there's a new listing, and you would have all the listing information on that property: price point, square footage, the year of the property, pictures, what neighborhood it's in, everything you could possibly really want. And so typically what happens is buyers either have a group of homes that they really are interested in seeing in person, or potentially one home that just came onto the market that they think that they're really interested in seeing. And so at that point, the buyer would be able to reach out to me and we would schedule a showing. I'm super flexible when it comes to the times at which we show. Generally speaking, because most people work, those showings are in the late afternoon or evenings, and then on weekends as well.
And that's another important factor in making sure you hire the right agent, that they're available. I can't tell you how many times we're doing an open house and a potential buyer comes in and they come in without their agent. And then they tell you they're working with an agent. And my question is, well, why are you doing the agent's job for them?
That's very true. Our goal is to meet your needs. And so that means if we're representing you, helping you go into the home, helping you see the positive features in the home, some things that could potentially be challenges, and just helping you go through the process of selecting that one home that you want to move forward on.
And because, again, who you hire truly does matter. All realtors are not created equal.
They're not. Again, going back to the example of the person who just got their license, I don't know how many homes they might have seen, very few possibly. Whereas, at Team Virgadamo, we see thousands of homes and have seen thousands of homes. And so we're really able to help point out things that are values for they're positive in terms of the value of the home, as well as things that might be challenges. And also because of our experience with the different types of financing and some of the other processes, again, it smooths the path out for our buyers, and they end up with a much more positive experience.
It's almost as if, hopefully you'll never need major surgery in your lifetime. But if you do need that major surgery, I think I'd much rather have somebody that has seen the procedure and taken care of that procedure, or have done the procedure many, many times, rather than the student who just graduated from medical school and just finished their residency. You want the expert. And again, you want to make sure that you've got the right agent. Okay, I got two questions regarding this stage, Dave, and you're starting the house hunting stage. Now, what happens if you walk into a home and it fits all of the bells and whistles? And I know you've heard this many times as well. You'll take a buyer into that house and it meets every criteria, or almost every criteria that they want. And they say, well, we're just starting the process. Let's keep looking. Have you seen that before? Yeah.
I have seen that before. And I have seen remorse that happens in those instances. We're tour guides in this process. So generally speaking, the captain of the ship, the person who makes the decisions, is the buyer. But certainly, having been in this business long enough, there are instances in which, especially at the beginning of the search process, a home does meet the needs. And you have to sometimes have a very frank conversation with the buyer to say, I know that this might only be the first or second home that you've seen, but really, in my experience, this really is something you should give careful consideration to. In some cases, the buyers have listened to that advice and have decided to trust. Again, it's all about relationships. And in other cases, the buyers may not. Again, because we're in a competitive marketplace, chances are if a buyer has such a positive response to a home, there are other buyers that are having positive responses to those homes. And, sometimes it is one of those pieces where the property will go under contract, and it unfortunately will teach us a lesson that if we're not moving on it, somebody else might be sleeping in it.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that expression. If you're sleeping on it, somebody else is sleeping in it. And unfortunately, that does happen sometimes. All right, so that's step 5. Okay, so you've got a home, and then I guess the next thing is what happens now? Step 6 is you're going to make an offer.
And that's a super exciting moment, but it's also a nerve-wracking moment for many buyers, because it's the first time maybe they've gone through this process. So realistically, what happens is we would have a sit down. In many cases, I might say, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee at a Starbucks, or let's meet at a Starbucks if, let's say, for instance, the buyer had made the decision to make an offer on the property sometime after we had completed the showing. And it's really important to sit down and talk about some key pieces, right? Because again, the buyer is the one who is steering the ship in terms of the amount that they're going to pay for a property, what they were willing to offer, and some other key features. But in essence, we sit down. We need some important information from the buyer. So the first of those are legal names, because those are what are going to go onto the title of the property, as well as an email address for each of the persons that are going to be signing the contract. That is so that you can e-sign, because you don't want to sit around while the agent is working on writing up all the documents. It takes about 2.5 to 3 hours to prepare an accurate set of offer documents, because there's a lot of information that we have to gather and then provide to you so that you can be comfortable with the purchase of the property, or with making the offer for the property. So again, we get the email address for each person, their full legal name, and then we start talking about what are the terms of the offer that you would like to offer. So the first of those is price. And we don't just pick a price out of thin air. So one of the things that differentiates Team Virgadamo from a lot of the other agents is that we have a very, very specific approach to how we price properties in terms of the offer. So just to give you an idea, we look at something called price per square foot, and we're going to look at the history of the properties that are in that same neighborhood that have sold within the last 6 months. And then we're going to look at what those properties sold for on a price per square foot. And then we're going to look at what those properties actually look like in terms of their finish level, in terms of other features that make that property more attractive. Maybe does it have a pool? Does it have an extra car garage? Is it fully updated? Does it back onto a conservation area? Are there other things included in the sale that make it a more valuable property?
So what you're saying is that you got mitigating factors. You just can't go by the price per square foot, even though we use that as a starting point. And I mean, we can sit at our desks all day long and pull numbers, but it's not until we see the property that it's going to really,
Absolutely. That's why showing is so critical.
Yep.
Because getting eyes on the actual property. Have you ever seen anybody's Facebook profile photos? They generally look really nice. Home buyers or home sellers do the same thing. Listing agents hire really good photographers. So a photo is not as same as being in an actual space and seeing the property. And I'm a big believer not just looking at the property, but feeling about how that property makes you feel in terms of that being a future home for you. And so we take a very, mathematical approach to valuing the home. Because if you think about it, we don't want to over-offer, and we also don't want to under-offer. Now, think about why that could be a problem, right? So if you over-offer, you're basically leaving money out on the table and not representing your buyer as well as you should. And again, we want to have a fiduciary relationship. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our buyers. At the other time, we also don't want to under-offer, and the reason for that is a property may already be marketed for sale at what would be considered a below-market price, and in those cases, you don't want to harden the seller to the offer that's being made by giving them an offer that is so far under market value or so far under what they are looking for that they don't end up wanting to negotiate, and they end up going with a different set of buyers.
So what I hear you saying is, you do the analysis, you advise the buyer, in terms of where the range should be, and then they make an offer. And at the end of the day, from what I'm also hearing you saying, is your offer should be a reasonable one, because ultimately, at the end of all this, it's not what the seller wants, it's not what the buyer wants, it's what the seller will accept and the buyer is willing to pay. And it's no different really than buying stock. I mean, if you bought stock, it was $100 a share today, and it's $120 tomorrow, you get $120. If it's worth $80 tomorrow, you get $80. So the offer should be reasonable. The offer is basically prepared, and that's step 6. So step 6 then is prepare your offer.
Correct. And there are a few other pieces to consider in making an offer. So the offer is not just the actual amount of money that you're going to be putting out there. It's also how much escrow payment
What do you mean by that?
Down.
What's escrow?
So basically, escrow is a prepayment from the buyer for items that are included or needed to be included in the purchase of a home. So, for instance, an escrow might include some funds that would be used to prepay the down payment on the property. Could be its property taxes. It could be an insurance premiums. But basically, the escrow deposit is a good faith sign from the buyer of their interest level in the home. So there are some important criteria in the contract that a buyer has to be aware of, such as, especially if you're financing, how quickly you're able to get final loan commitment. There's some timelines in there, because in essence, what happens is when we go under contract with a seller, that home is off the market and nobody else can see that home. And so in essence, the seller is taking a risk and wants to make sure that the property closes.
Let me ask you, nobody can see the home at all once it goes under contract?
Well, generally speaking, no. There are options where buyers can put a backup contract on it.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, especially in our current market, if, let's say, for instance, there was a home that a buyer liked, but it went under contract, we would not typically recommend putting in a backup offer on that home, because while you're waiting for that backup offer to potentially materialize, there are other homes on the market that could very well meet your needs, and you're not seeing those properties. And you wouldn't want to be under contract on multiple properties simultaneously.
Makes sense. And I can tell you from a person myself that lists a lot of properties for sale, because I work primarily with sellers, that once a property goes under contract, the amount of showings slow down immediately, even though we are taking backups on the home. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's, we've completed wow, this seems like a long and a complicated process. And again, I keep getting back to.
That's why a guide is so important.
Guide is so important. Okay. Step 7. Okay. You've got the offer. It's prepared. Now what do you do with that offer?
So once the buyer is comfortable with the terms that we've talked about, so we talked about purchase price, escrow, there also are deadlines in there, such as how quickly you would want to close the property, and then how long of an inspection window you would want to have. Those are all what we call negotiable items. So we talk through those options. The buyer gets to determine what those are that they want to present in their offer. And then once the buyer has signed, or buyers have signed the documents, we take the the pre-approval letter, as well as the possibly proof of funds if it's a cash purchase, and we send those documents over to the listing agent. That listing agent's job is to then present the offer to the sellers of the property. So hopefully we can find an agreement.
And what happens when that offer is presented to the seller by the listing agent?
So typically the sellers will have a few options in terms of how to respond. Obviously, from the buyer standpoint, if we put together a good package, meaning that the offer amount is reasonable, if the escrow amount is satisfactory, if the closing date falls within what the seller was hoping for, if the inspection window is not over the top, then the seller would be able to say that they accept the offer. They then sign the contract, and when that contract gets returned back to myself, the buyer's agent, we're now under something called technically being under contract. That means that at this point, there's an agreement between both parties to move forward under the terms of the contract to purchase that property.
That's assuming, though, that they're accepting this contract.
Correct.
What are the other options that you mentioned that the seller has?
So the seller could very well reject the offer and
Entirely.
not respond. Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's why it's so important to be smart about the offer amount. Again, we want to get the best deal possible for our buyers, but understanding that the first thing is to actually get the transaction to take place.
And if I could butt in there real quickly, again, being someone that sells properties as a listing agent, I can't tell you how many times we will receive a lowball offer on a property. I got one this past week where somebody made an offer for $100,000 under the listed price. And basically, I told the seller, I said, please don't shoot me. I'm just the messenger. And I said, do you want a counter? And they say, no. And then you get back to that buyer's agent and they said, well, are you going to make a counter? And they said the seller is saying no. Whereas if a more reasonable offer came in, they very well could have made that counter. So basically, first one is they accept the offer. The second one is they come back and they counter the offer that was made, correct?
Correct. And that happens more often than not. And so basically what that means is that the listing agent would say, my clients are okay on these terms. Maybe they're okay on the escrow amount, or they're okay on the closing date. They might not be okay on price. I've also seen plenty of instances where the price is fine, but the closing date might be the issue, or possibly the amount of time for the inspection period. Because in the majority of the contracts,
we'll talk about inspections in a second, but go ahead.
Yeah, so those are then features that can be negotiated. And so my role as the buyer's agent is to then communicate with my buyers to say, this is what they have come back to us with. What would you like to respond back with, right? And again, in this case now, the buyer has the same exact options that the seller had in the first instance of this example, right? So you can say, I accept. We change the contract to reflect the new terms. The buyer signs. Typically, the sellers have already signed the counter, and then now we're under contract.
Or they walk away.
So
very simple, 3 options. They accept.
Correct.
You counter and you negotiate it, and then it gets accepted, or it gets rejected by either party.
Correct. And we can continue to go back and forth and negotiate, but typically most transactions are resolved relatively quickly, assuming, 2 things, basically, that the seller wants to sell and the buyer wants to buy.
Perfect. Okay, so let's assume now we have if the contract wasn't accepted, well, then we move on to the next property.
Correct.
Okay, if it is accepted, which we hope it is, then what winds up happening is now we are under contract. So what are the next steps under contract that will take place once that contract has been accepted?
Sure. So depending on the type of purchase, meaning if it's a cash purchase, there are slightly different deadlines for the purchase of the property as opposed to a conventional FHA, VA, financed purchase. And the main differentiation between those are the amount that's being financed, what's called like the loan to value. So typically VA loans are 100% loan to value, FHA loans are 3.5% loan to value, and then conventional loans are 20% loan to value.
Or conventional loans can be less
different. It depends, right? And that's why we encourage you to consult with a lender because they can help you go through that. But there are some timelines in the contract that talk about financing, right? And so depending on the type of financing, you typically as the buyer have to apply for a real mortgage within a certain number of dates of the contract being accepted. You have some obligations to have loan commitment within a certain number of days of the contract being accepted. And then obviously there'll be a closing date that will be dependent upon the financing company being able to get everything they need in order to be able to close the sale.
Now you mentioned the word before. Now those are your financing commitments,
Correct.
Okay? But you mentioned the word before, inspections.
Correct.
What did you mean by that, Dave? Does
Sure.
the buyer just go in and look around the house, or what's involved? What do you mean by a home inspection?
Sure. Just like we had talked about needing an expert and not just taking a tour by yourself, we obviously would highly recommend that for any property to be purchased, that the buyer conduct inspections. And in that sense, what it means is hiring a company, a certified building inspector to come in and do inspections of the property. So most contracts that are being written these days are on the as-is contract. That contract gives the buyer a certain number of days within which to conduct inspections and within which, for any reason whatsoever, they could go ahead and cancel the contract and receive their escrow deposit back.
So the inspection takes place during a certain period of time. If it's not satisfactory, they can cancel.
Correct.
Or what else can they do if maybe some items are there and and they still want to go through with the purchase?
Yeah, so those are now negotiable items as well. Assuming that the seller still wants to sell the property, and in many cases, the seller may not have had a home inspection done on their property, so they may not necessarily be as familiar with some of the pieces that may need some attention. And so basically what happens is we can negotiate for basically repairs, or depending on what we're talking about in terms of the items, sometimes money back to the buyer in terms of either a reduced purchase price or possibly cash at closing to help cover the costs of those repairs. A very common one, for instance, would be maybe some issues related to flooring, where the seller or the buyer, based on the inspection reports, sees that maybe there's some cracked tiles they may not have seen during the showing of the property. And so in this case, that could be a negotiable item where the buyer could, after receiving the inspection report back from the inspector, go back to the seller and say, I'd like an adjustment in either the purchase price or some additional cash at closing so I can go ahead and hire a contractor to make those repairs on the home, put in new tiles or change the flooring. Again, that's a very common thing, and every home and every situation is unique. But that is definitely a piece of the process and why you would definitely want to do inspections for every purchase.
During that inspection period, not only are we looking for major problems or problems with the home, during that period, I would think that the buyer wants to make sure that they can get insurance on the property. If it happens to be in a flood zone, what the flood insurance will cost.
Yes.
So basically, during the period, essentially what the buyer is doing their due diligence or their homework. And once again, if it doesn't work out, they can back out, they can negotiate, or they can move forward and accept everything, just like in the terms of the contract.
Correct. Yeah, the same three options are on the table.
Okay, so we're past the inspection period now, okay? And let's assume we're moving on. The inspection has been either negotiated or we're moving on, and the buyer still wants the house, the seller still wants to sell the house. It's a finance deal. What happens next?
So that's where the finance company will have some final pieces that they have to process prior to getting to the closing table. So typically, once we're through the inspection process, really the next piece is the appraisal. So the appraisal is where the finance company wants to make sure that they're not lending funds for a property that's not worth what it is that they're lending, right? It just makes sense. You wouldn't give somebody a loan of $100,000 on a property that's worth $50,000. Because at the end of the day, if there were to be some sort of problem where the buyer needed to sell the home in the future, or there was some sort of delinquency through no fault of anybody, the lending company wants to make sure that property's value is secured because they're lending money for the purchase of that property.
And if the appraisal comes back low, it seems like we've got those same three options all over again, right?
Absolutely. The same three options come into play, right? The seller could choose to lower their price. The seller could say, no, I'm not adjusting the price. Or in the case of a low appraisal, the buyer could potentially add additional funds to make up the difference. Because again, at the end of the day, the lender is only going to lend a certain amount for the purchase of the property. And we've seen all of those circumstances. You know, a buyer who really, really likes a home might be willing to put in a little bit more money to secure that property. And in a lot of cases also, the appraisals actually can come above what the contract price is, and that's always a win for the buyer, because in essence you've gotten some equity in the home without even actually moving into the home yet.
So what I'm hearing over and over and over again is that with all of these steps and everything that's involved in this transaction, you better be hiring the right person, because you're basically looking now for a skilled negotiator to negotiate on your behalf if you're the buyer. So once again, Dave, who you hire truly matters.
It does. You're going to be guided through this process, and the advice that you get to help you position yourself in terms of what options are really the best to try and basically come up to whatever outcome you want. Again, all along, we're assuming that the buyer still wants the property and wants to move forward. And so we will tailor our advice to make that a possibility. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the buyer is the captain of the ship, but our job is to advise you along the way.
And we're not saying by any means that you should hire Team Virgadamo, although we feel if we're in your market, basically it would be to your advantage to do so. However, there's a lot of good companies, there's a lot of good agents out there. When you make that decision that we spoke about in terms of the early steps, you need to make sure that you're hiring the right person. It doesn't have to be us. It can be, we have a lot of colleagues out there that do a great job. And, just make sure that you're doing the right thing, hiring the right person.
Yeah, it's about fit.
Absolutely.
And you know it. You'll know when the feeling is the right feeling.
Okay, so basically, We've gone through it's financed, we've gotten through the inspection, we've gotten through the appraisal. If it's a cash deal, what happens? If somebody's paying cash for the house, we're past the inspection period, now what takes place?
So a few days before closing, the title agent, who is really the organization that handles the actual final transaction, will reach out to the buyer to let them know, hey, and really it's to schedule the closing. Hey, this is the amount that needs to be brought to the table through a wire transfer, so that way the closing can actually take place. As a buyer's agent, our role at that point is to make sure that the title company and the buyer are communicating, and that every party is aware of really what the schedule is and what's going to happen. And then we actually do one final walkthrough, that either the day of closing or the evening prior to closing, whatever's best for our client's schedule. And we go into the home to make sure that the home is still in the condition it was when we initially saw the home for the first time. Make sure that really the seller has cleared out all of his belongings to make sure the property is really in a good transferable state, and that basically we're just finalizing the last details for the closing, which should be taking place either that same day or the next day.
And so that's really step 8. Close the sale.
Close the sale.
And those are the steps involved. You do your walkthrough, the title company organizes everything, everybody walks away from the table, and now you've bought yourself a new home.
Correct. And there's no greater
Wow.
feeling than being
Wow.
at the table. Typically speaking, the sellers sign either earlier in the day. Sometimes they can sign at the same time as the buyers. It depends on the scheduling. But obviously, when the buyers have signed off on all the documents and then the title agent hands them the keys, seeing that impression, their face when they realize they are now homeowners, is a truly wonderful experience. I will tell you that that's one of the reasons I love working with buyers so much.
You love working with people.
I do. Well,
this man is the best people person I've ever
I do,
seen.
but there's something really satisfying about helping somebody buy a home. Buying a home is kind of like almost a rebirth. It gives you an opportunity for a fresh start, and that's something that in life can be very rewarding. And I generally have found nothing but really positive experiences from helping people make that transaction, make that happen. And I've made many friends from people who have bought homes, with me, because again, you become kind of a part of their life. Again, a small part, but it's something that I take a great deal of satisfaction in helping them secure that property.
Okay, Dave, if you could, let's just take a moment to recap, and let's give us those 8 steps that are involved for the buyer to buy their home.
Okay, so step 1 is prepare to buy. It's not an impulsive decision. 2, meet and select a real estate agent who's going to take care of your needs. 3, establish the budget, meaning what is our price range and how are we going to pay for the property. Step 4 is determine what you're really looking for in a house. Step 5 is to start looking at properties. Step 6 is to put together an offer for a property that you've selected. Step 7 is to send that offer over to the sellers and then negotiate any adjustments based on their response. Step 8 is to close the sale through an inspection and appraisal process, and then you end up with the keys to your wonderful home.
Well, there you have it, folks. From Dave Middleton, buyer's agent extraordinaire. Okay, those are the 8 steps involved in buying a home. Dave, I can't thank you enough for being with us today and sharing this with potential buyers. And hopefully, if anybody has any questions, they'll reach out to you or reach out to the team, and we'll be happy to help them in any way we can. So once again, we certainly appreciate you being with us and sharing your expertise and the steps involved in buying a home. Because, for somebody that's inexperienced, those steps can be pretty daunting.
Because who you hire truly matters.
Yes, it does.
Thank you very much,
again.
Paul.
Have a great
Appreciate
day.
it. Thank you, guys. Bye, friends.
See you.